And I don't make monetary policies, right? I'm not sitting in RBI and working on what should be the interest rate for the entire economy. So that's typically what you would call a macroeconomist who looks at the entire economy's policy system. On the other hand, when you look at specific sectors, like for example, transport sector, which is where I'm working, or gender, where again I'm working, or industrial corridors, you have certain incentive systems and regulatory frameworks in place in each of these sectors.
Hello and welcome everybody to Career Talks with Mentoria. My name is Nikhar Arora and I'm one of the founders and CEO of Mentoria. Our passion is to help you discover yours, and through these podcasts, through these webinars and talk shows, we want to give you a very realistic understanding of the career that you're going to be heading into. The more you know, the more informed your career and educational decision. Today, we're going to have an incredible conversation on the world of economics and building a career in it. And we have with us two very, very special guests. We've got Mitali Nikore. She has more than 11 years of experience in this field and is the founder and chief economist of her own research group called Nikore Associates. Please tell me if I'm pronouncing correctly. Super. Mitali has advised multilateral organizations such as ADB, World Bank, and the United Nations, as well as private sector consulting firms like PwC, Ernst & Young, Genesis Analytics. She built a strong foundation by attending institutes like the London School of Economics. Sorry, I have to have this because the amount of certifications and achievements that she has just keep going on and on. Hindu College, my knees are shaking almost. We'd also like to congratulate her for being mentioned in Forbes 22 for the 2022 list. Welcome, Mitali, and thank you so much for taking the time out.
Thanks, Nikar.
We also have with us Jahanwi Singh. She spent close to a decade in the field, primarily working with Export-Import Bank of India, as you can see in her background. She's also consistently provided her insights on international economics, trade and investment, and insurance, and several other aspects. She's been to India's top universities and colleges such as Miranda College from Delhi University and JNU to get her degrees in economics, and is currently doing her fellowship in the University of Cambridge. Thank you so much, Jahanwi, for taking the time out and gracing us with your presence. Super. So let's begin by a quick round of introductions from you guys also in terms of who you are, what kind of work you do, right? The audience would love to hear from you. So Mitali, why don't you get started?
So I think thanks a lot, first of all, Nikhar, and hi, Jahanwi, lovely to meet with you, and a very good evening to all of our audience. I think, just as a quick intro to what I do, it's actually quite hard to describe what I do now. But I think it will be easier if I could describe a little bit what I did and what I do, and then it will be easy to understand what I do now. So, I started off my career pretty much as a, run-of-the-mill economic analyst at one of the consulting firms that you mentioned, Genesis. But the only good thing that happened for me was that because I had studied and done my master's abroad, I was able to get an international placement. And I moved to Africa very early in my career, and I started as a development economist at an analyst level in South Africa. Before that, I was also with the UN for about a year as a consultant, and of course an intern then consultant. But of course, seeing the security situation in Africa, I came back to India and became a, sort of consultant here in PwC. But after that, when I joined ADB, after a few years of working in PwC, I felt like my life was truly taking off, my career was truly taking off, and I became an economist at ADB for a few years. And I have just started a full-time position at the World Bank just about like last week. But in between, I would say in the years, say 2018 to 2022, just till now, I've been everywhere. I've been like a freelancer, looking at projects in gender, looking at projects in MSME, looking at projects in economic corridors, industrial corridors, trade. And the biggest thing that I've done, I think, in the last 4 years is I've been a voice. And I've been very lucky to have platforms where my voice has been amplified. And I think that that comes out of a combination of the fact that I was an advocate of gender equality in many ways, trying to highlight the issues around female labor force participation. But also because of this, I got a very unique opportunity from the World Bank to contribute on the intersection of gender and transport sector. And as an economist, you become a chameleon. So I think, Nikar, when you say, okay, why don't you introduce what you do? I will say I'm a chameleon. I go into a project, and whatever is the requirement of the project, I deliver it somehow. Just because I'm an economist, I can do it. And I think the other thing that I am is an advocate for gender equality, because that's something you never stop doing. Whoever has employed you, whoever is paying you for your time. Today, for me, it is World Bank. For last 4 years, it's been a portfolio of organizations where I've worked, and I set up Nikore Associates that helped me do that. But at the same time, at the core of who you are is a voice, and that's something I feel I can't silence anymore. It's open, it's out there, and that's what being an economist, I feel, in many ways is. It's about advocating for the rights of the people that you believe should be empowered and be part of the economy, which at this point women are not.
Super, thanks a ton for sharing that, Mitali. Jahanwi, over to you.
So my academic background has already been informed to you all by Nikore. I started my professional career in 2013. I joined the Export-Import Bank of India. It's wholly owned by the government of India. It's 100% government of India owned entity. And I've been working with Exim Bank since 2013. I have always been very passionate about economics. And I always knew I wanted to do economics, pursue a career in economics. And that is why I did my bachelor's, my master's in economics. And then I was fortunate enough to get a job as an economist at India Exim Bank. I joined as a management trainee, and then I have progressed within the organization. And today I serve as the chief manager with the bank. I have worked on areas such as international trade, economic policies, agriculture, and industry. And my research work has also led to a lot of policy evolution, and the recommendations have been useful for the central government as well as state government. A lot of the policies that you might be hearing about, like for example, the Niti Aayog Export Preparedness Index. So, I have worked on that, and a lot of state level policies, also export related policies. I have worked on those as well. In terms of international exposure, I have also worked on several institutional capacity building assignments in Asia, Africa, and Latin America. I worked in countries like Ghana, Rwanda, and currently I'm working on an institutional capacity building assignment in Barbados as well. Apart from this, I've also been contributing to discussions on contemporary topics of relevance to international trade through authored articles in media, both national and international media. And I also edit a bi-monthly newsletter that is published in English, Hindi, and 10 regional languages. It's the Agri-Export Advantage. And this is just a brief of what some of the things that I've done since 2013. And as we talk more today, I think I'll get an opportunity to tell you more about the kind of work that I do.
I think Jahanwi can of course talk more about the macro and the shape. But Nikar, I think, and I'm now speaking as somebody who's been working with the media for the last 4 years. So every time the GDP data comes out, right, and if you have economist in your job title, you will get a phone call. Ma'am, आज GDP data निकल रहा है. आप please इस पे comment कर दीजिए. And it's great. I love it. I've done it for the last 3-4 years, and I do it whenever inflation data comes out, when monetary policy is released. So sometimes when you see this representation of economists on TV, it shapes your thinking about what an economist does, right? So the first thing I would say is to track the health of the economy. That's one of the major jobs of an economist. And this is why you see them on TV every time you see a GDP data release or you see inflation data coming out, because these are data and indicators which give a perspective on the health of the economy. That is our economy doing well? Are we doing well when it comes to global economies? Are we, proceeding in the right direction? That's at a macro level. At a micro level, you have economists who work on different sectors. Like, I don't call myself a macroeconomist because I don't make policies for the entire country's trade like Jahanwi is doing. I think she's more of a macroeconomist. And I don't make monetary policies, right? I'm not sitting in RBI and working on what should be the interest rate for the entire economy. So that's typically what you would call a macroeconomist, who looks at the entire economy's policy system. On the other hand, when you look at specific sectors, like for example, transport sector, which is where I'm working, or gender, where again I'm working, or industrial corridors, you have certain incentive systems and regulatory frameworks in place in each of these sectors. I'll give you a very relatable example. Think about the fact that you take a metro to work every day, right? And you pay a certain ticket price for that ride that you take. That price was probably determined by an economist, because that price was set to optimize the trade-off between affordability and the cost of running the metro. You want it to be as affordable as possible for a large number of commuters to use public transport. But at the same time, you have to keep your metro running, and that entails a cost. So doing that calculation and arriving at a number which maximizes your profitability in such a scenario is the core of a microeconomist's job. And you have therefore microeconomists sitting in different sectors doing different kind of problem solving on a daily basis. And a very interesting field of economists that is emerging currently, there are three. First is behavioral economics, where by studying consumer behavior and by studying how we react to situations, economists are finding problems and solutions to those problems for, retail, for hospitality, pricing, etc. The second is environmental economists, where we are trying to attach cost to climate change. And we are trying to attach an environmental cost to each of our consumption and actions therein. And the third, which I belong to, is feminist economics, where we are trying to say that the economics and the way we have been arriving at a lot of our solutions in economics is biased, structurally biased against women. Because women do not get equal pay, because women do utmost amount of unpaid work, because women are structurally disadvantaged when they are born till the time that they die. At each time when you say that economics as a rational actor, the rational actor assumption itself is flawed, because women cannot act without constraint. And therefore we are re-examining a lot of models and assertions that are made by traditional economic theorists. So, you have your traditional, these are the basic schools, your macro, micro at a sector level, and then these new emerging fields of thought like feminist economics, environmental economics, and behavioral economics, which are at different stages of development. I would in fact say that feminist economics is the least developed out of the different schools of thought at this point in time.
As economists, we study either humans, individuals, or we study aggregates, economic aggregates. So I can study about the choices people make, or I can study or research on the decisions that nations take as a whole. So the concepts that we hear like GDP, inflation, these are the macro concepts at an economy level. And from an individual perspective, when I'm looking at things like what choices I make as a consumer, what are my welfare gains when I consume a particular commodity, things like this. And as it was highlighted earlier, there are several new fields also that are emerging. Behavioral economics is something that has changed economics for good, I feel, because one of the basic assumptions that we make in economics, when I was studying economics, the very first lesson that you take, you're told that you're dealing with humans, men, women, as rational beings. But when I myself as an economist, when I go to buy vegetables or fruits in the market, I'm not optimizing my choices, I'm not having a maximizing behavior there. So the fact that humans are not rational is something that is very new to economics. Behavioral economics is not that very old. And we saw a lot of overlap between psychology and economics in this emerging field of behavioral economics.
I think the first thing why I became an economist, by the way, this is also an interesting story. So I was in class 10 and my school was starting a model UN, and I was obsessed. I wanted a diplomatic passport. So my diplomatic passport, by the way, is coming in February. So this is like a big, thank you. So after 12 years of working. So, but in class 10, I just wanted a diplomatic passport. I just wanted to stand in that queue, like the one at the airport. I'm like, yeah, I'm special, I'm important. So, so that was my motivation to join the UN. And then, of course, over time, as I was doing Model UN and looking more at the UN system at that time, I was very inspired with the work they were doing, particularly around humanitarian assistance and assisting vulnerable groups and their own gender. So, I asked around to whatever mentors were available at the time, right? Because we didn't have this kind of like a platform like you set up. So, and everyone said, Beta, you just do a PhD in economics. Because whoever we know, मतलब हमारे network में वो जो uncle हैं, वो जो UN में काम करते हैं, उनका PhD है economics में, and he got a job, तो तुमको भी मिल जाएगा. So this is this, advice that one is getting, and I'm talking about what year was that? 2006, when I was in class 11, 12, right? I mean, we didn't have these kind of structured systems. And then my mother is hell-bent at this point that I am not going to do my bachelor's abroad. I will be doing it in Delhi University. And I must get in. And I have gone under the obsession that मुझे Stephen's ही चाहिए. But of course, CBSE had other plans, and therefore I could not get Stephen's. I got Hindu, and I'm happy with that. I'm glad many ways, because when I went to Hindu, I could start my own society. It was a very liberal atmosphere compared to many other colleges. So, but yeah, like on a serious note, where do you actually employ these economists, right? So you have international organizations as one of the biggest employers. And many people actually start off in this journey to join an international organization because they are told that they employ economists. And even today, when I look at any of the divisions within ADB, UN, World Bank, all of them, nearly 50% of the staff is from an economics background, right? So that's the first thing. Second, of course, government, as Jahanwi, is a testament to the fact that you have a large proportion of economics. In fact, in India, we also have the Indian Economics Service, where you, as a postgrad in econ, many people give that exam, and they are sitting in Niti Aayog, sitting in NCAR, sitting in Finance Ministry, taking some of these decisions. So that's a big prestigious employer. And then there is private sector where, as you were saying, you have. But the fourth and most emerging category is economics consulting, which I was also doing for a while, and I've just given it up joining the bank. But economics consulting is, like you said, not every company will need a behavioral economics person to be there 365 days. Don't need it full time. I need a consult. I go to a company which provides the consult. And I think as gig work is increasing in the organized sector in India as well as abroad, people, individuals, as well as group of people coming together with a boutique consulting firm or even in a large firm. Like PwC also has an economics consulting wing. Deloitte also does. So you will see it everywhere because consulting assignments when it comes to bringing economists for a short time is more profitable than employing the economist for the entire year when she only has work for 3 months. So definitely it is better to get a consulting firm in place. So these are some of the biggest ones that I'm seeing, and NGOs are another one if you don't want to get paid. It's very different. So I don't know anything about finance or accounting or anything. I have not done a CFA. I have not done any F related degree except feminism, which I have taught myself. And so there's there's nothing on that. So when you are looking at the operations of a company, that's in the operations division. An economist typically in a private sector will end up in the strategy, where you are looking at the macro environment in which your company is going to work. So a finance person will look at your company's finances, that yes, my company's return is this, profit and loss statement is this, I'm making the entire accounting. An economist will say, okay, here is the world. There's a war going on. What is going to happen to GDP? There's a oil price crisis going on. What is going to happen to GDP? How will that reduction in the GDP globally affect India's GDP, then affect my sector, then affect consumer sentiment, and then finally affect my company? Right? So they will look at the higher order impacts. I think one very important thing that economists are, apart from chameleons, is that we are very glorified narcissists. Everything revolves around us because we are the only ones who can analyze what's going on everywhere in the macro picture. So we really think of ourselves as very important.
I would just like to highlight one fact that, say 20 years earlier, perhaps there were very limited options for economists. You either got into academics or there were certain government jobs, certain international institutions, and that was the end of the world. But very few people choose to stay in academics these days. Even the big tech companies, you see Amazon, you see Microsoft, you see Google, they have hired economists like anything. There are so many posts for economists in all these big tech companies. So what do these people actually do? Economists in these big tech companies. So as you were asking, how is economist different from a financial analyst? So a financial analyst is typically an inward-looking profile. It is an inward-facing group in any company, where you'll be perhaps looking at the balance sheet of the company, the profit and loss statement, looking at really finance-related aspects. But as Mitali also mentioned, the inward-facing groups, the economists that are there in the inward-facing groups, they are more at the strategy level, like forecasting which product will do how well in, say, 1 year down the line, 3 years down the line, 5 years down the line, the planning associated with that product, the pricing that would be appropriate for that product, testing it in the market, in a smaller market first, to see how is the uptake of that product, and then having a market research sort of a strategy around that. And they are also part of the data science teams in a lot of these organizations. So these are the inward facing roles. There are also economists that have outward facing roles in these big tech companies. So their policy department, their public relations department, a lot of times they need to justify a lot of their policies to the national regulator or to the government. And that is the time that these outward facing groups come into play. So this is the entire gamut of things that an economist can do in a tech company. Apart from that, the Central Bank of India, RBI, the Reserve Bank of India, that also has many vacancies for economists. There's an entire cadre of economists that are hired by the Central Bank of India. So that is another option for economists.
Super.
Other than that, I think Mitali covered everything else.
Fantastic. Sounds good. Thank you so much for sharing that, Jahanwi. Let's dive into a little bit of education. Right. Before I get into education, I do want to know from you now. 10th, 11th, 12th में ठीक है economics पढ़ा तो देते हैं, right? You know, some schools of course teach a little bit of basic economics, right? But it's typically at a college level that people determine कि मेरे को economics आगे पढ़नी है कि नहीं पढ़नी है. But one of the things I'd love to know from both of you is what kinds of interest traits, personality traits, ability traits, or what kind of hobbies, or what kind of certain triggers or observations should I have in myself to think about कि यार अच्छा मेरे को ये अच्छा लगता है तो I can become an economist, and that can be something that I pursue as a career at a 10th, 11th, 12th or at a college level. Like, what are your thoughts on that?
Jahanwi, why don't you start?
Okay, so I think you need to like data, because a lot of your professional life will revolve around data. So the ability to, review data, observe patterns, draw logical conclusions around that data. So basically the entire analytical skills, what we call, that is very important. So if you think you like data, you can do a lot of number crunching. I think this fits the bill. Other than that, I think writing skills are very important, because after you're done with the modeling and, after you're done taking out all the results from there, after that, you need to write it in a very comprehensive way, and also in a manner that in which the reader finds it, finds it easily digestible, because a lot of the time we can be using jargons that the reader may not understand. So we need to write it in very simple language. So that is again a skill that you must have. If you don't have, of course, you can build it over time. But writing is another very important aspect. And from an attitude perspective, I think perseverance is something that you need to have, because there'll be days on end where you'll be just trying to change the variables, testing, going back to the model, taking out certain variables, adding new variables, constructing the model, testing the model, revising the model. It takes a lot of time. And you need to have that perseverance and the patience to just sit through and work on it for days altogether. And many a times you might not even reach at any conclusion. So you have to be prepared for that as well. So I think that is a sort of an attitude that would really help. So these three things basically: ability to use data, see data and have logical conclusions out of it, perseverance, and good writing skills. I think those are some important attitude and skill sets that are required.
I am a type A personality. I am not satisfied regardless of how much work I have. I still want more. There are some people who are not type A, right? They are not insane. They are normal. Say कि मुझे दिन में 8 घंटे काम करना है, and that's it. And then there are some who want to be very relaxed, right? कि हमें उतना full time काम ही नहीं करना है. We just want to work 4 hours. The beauty of economics as a profession is that there is space for all types of personalities in it. You can be type A and aim to be the chief economist of a large international organization, or run your own think tank, or go into every room and dominate it. Or you can be, somebody who likes to work in the background a little bit, but producing very well researched, numbers that your leadership can use. Right? So regardless of your personality type, you can fit in as an economist, because there are roles for economists who want to be front facing, and there are roles for economists who prefer working in the background. Right? So that's the first thing. You just have to pick which side you want to be on, and that is something you can discover as your career progresses. You don't have to decide that on day one. Second thing, I of course agree with all of the skill sets that Jahanwi mentioned, but my perspective of the Indian education system, which has come as a more of a product of, it's actually a byproduct of my marriage, because I see my husband struggling with it daily when he's counseling his kids. The way math is taught in India, it deters people from liking numbers. It deters people from, being able to conduct the kind of data analysis that we need as economists. And I have a friend, she's doing her PhD at the American University right now, and she did English honors because she was so scared of economics. But in her PhD, she had no option because she picked up a PhD in public policy, which also is very quantitative in the US. And she had to do foundational math courses, and she aced them, despite not having math for almost 7 years in her career. Why? Because they taught it well. They taught it with patience. So, in my view, anybody who's interested in economics and faces this challenge that, हमें math पढ़ना पड़ेगा, I would recommend that they invest in studying math with a good tutor who can, or teacher in school, or anybody who can get through to you, when they're teaching math to you. I don't know what's the right way to teach math. I'm not an expert in that. But I will definitely say pick a method that works for you and don't give up on it, because there's a rich world that lies ahead in economics where, once you've done your master's and you crossed it, you don't necessarily need to go back to doing modeling. I have not done modeling after my master's. Like Jahanwi, I think you had much more of a quantitative modeling economics career. For me, it's not been like that. As a development economist, I've done much more of policy solutioning and design, as opposed to just running models of that type. But there have been others who have been modeling experts, especially statisticians on my team. But I've been doing the thinking. So you don't have to be brilliant at the math as long as your thinking is in the right direction. You have to invest, though, in getting over that fear of math so that you can do the data analysis. And Jahanwi is absolutely right. Again, as an economist, you can be an econometrician, somebody who specializes in modeling and data work, but you can also be more statistically minded and focus more on statistical analysis like correlations, regression, and which are simpler to do, which is what I've done. I have not necessarily gone into the mathematical modeling part of economics. I may do it when I do my PhD, but I may not do it, even then. Even in a PhD, you can pick up more of empirical work. So I think first thing is to not be afraid of math and to invest in that skill if economics interests you. The third thing is, in terms of writing, of course, I agree with Jahanwi that we have to write a lot of our results. But in my work as a public advocate, I have not just had to write, I have had to go and present and speak and make videos and make sure that the headline numbers come out. So it's not just about the writing in my experience, it's also about the storyline. You are selling your analysis in today's world. You're not just putting it out there, you're selling it. You need people to click that button and read it. And for that, you have to be aware of what looks good. How can I make my presentation graphically appealing? How can I make my pitch, give those numbers in a manner that the person will actually take notice? So all of that comes from not only studying but also public speaking that I've done for all of my school life and college life. It comes from just being very loud and somebody who couldn't be put down. So it comes from that nurturing of soft skills that my parents did for me. Nobody in school did it. In school, they will tell you to shut up and keep quiet. My mother would scream at the school authorities and say, "You cannot tell my daughter to keep quiet." So I don't think that being a successful economist is only about just technical skills. I think that the beauty of economics as a profession is that you can have any personality type and fit in, but you have to hone your math for sure and not be afraid of it. Don't give in to this idea that Indian education में जो math की CBSE की textbook है, that's math, that is not it. And at the same time, you have to hone your soft skills, your speaking, your communications, your graphics, presentation, so that you can be an economist whose work is getting wider, viewership. And it's only going to get worse, because the internet is full of so much research. So you have to make sure your voice stands out.
I personally, in my high school, had economics. I was a science student with economics as an additional subject. So that was my background. But I went to Miranda House and we had people from the humanities, the arts stream. We had people from the commerce team. So definitely at the high school level, it's not much of a barrier. But of course, you should have read mathematics, I think. I cannot highlight this enough, but you need to like mathematics at least. Some people in India, they detest mathematics. I mean, this may not be the best career for you. That is my perspective. And at my postgrad level, I had people who were from different backgrounds. They did not have a bachelor's in economics necessarily. Some of them were engineers. Some of them had a master's in had a bachelor's in mathematics. Some were coming for their double postgrad. And then I know people who were in their PhD who did not have a postgraduate degree in economics. I know people who have done their postgrad in psychology, but they did their PhD in economics. As I told you earlier, the overlap between psychology and economics in the field of behavioral economics. I know people who have done history in their undergrads, and then they did a PhD in economics. So people from different background, you can, at a much later stage in your life, you can realize that, okay, this is something that I really like. This is one topic that I'm really passionate about. And you can take it up as a PhD career, or you can, start with a postgrad in economics, even at a later stage in your career.
Got it. Understood. So you're saying graduation, you can do it in anything, right? It's preferable, of course, if you do a BA. There's also a BSc in economics, right? So you've got a BA in economics, you've got a BSc in economics. What is your perspective of which one of these, is ideal from an economics perspective?
So there are certain natural sciences like physics, chemistry, and then you have humanities. And then you have something what we call social sciences. So economics is a social sciences subject. Now, whether it is a science or an art, it is a debate. It is a debate, and people have different opinion on it. Some people say there is a lot of modeling involved in it. It has scientific underpinnings. There are models. There are rational assumptions underlying. So it is a science, but it is not settled whether it is an art or a science. What is settled is it is a social science. So you name it MSc, you name it MA, the broad gamut of things that you will read is broadly the same. So in India, you have the D School, which will give you an MA in economics. You have JNU, which will give you an MA in economics. You have IGIDR, which will give you an MSc in economics. But if you look in the terms of coursework, it will not be very, very different.
Got it. So you're saying BA, BSc, MA, MSc doesn't matter, khali economics padho, bachelor's or a master's level pay. Even if you don't study it at a bachelor's level, you can get into it at a master's level, is what I've learned so far.
Right.
PhD not necessary, I'm assuming.
Yes.
Padhana hai to PhD karo.
No, PhD you can have a postgrad degree in any subject and you can take up an PhD in economics. I mean, of course, certain universities will have certain qualifying criteria that you need to be a postgrad in economics. In that case, you cannot do anything. But there are options, for PhD at good universities, even if you don't have a postgrad in economics.
I think economists have mastered the art of being scientists. Just to settle the arts and science debate, we are very artsy scientists. So so that's there. But on a serious note, I do believe that it's very tough to make a transition from non-math bachelors to economics masters. So say if you did an engineering bachelor's in an IIT, you can easily keep up with the coursework of an MSc Economics at LSE. But if you did history in Delhi University, you're not even going to make it into the door of any decent UK, Europe, or US university for a master's. It will be a scam if they let you in. And rightly so, because most of the people from DU were coming to LSE for their masters were almost failing. And we had a bridge year. So all of us had to do a bridge year, where in the first year we just did intensive math courses. And then in the second year we got actual master's course at LSE. And this is the same thing that I think Cambridge is also doing, this bridge year thing. Oxford doesn't do it because Oxford only admits one person every year from India. My husband happened to be one of those people in his year, and that's it. They don't admit more than one. So that one person is obviously an insane genius. But other than that, they don't admit normal people. So we should forget Oxford. But LSE, Warwick, and all of these really good UK universities where you can go for a good solid master's after a bachelor's in DU or any of the other good colleges. We had so many people in LSE who were from Presidency, Kolkata. Because, a lot of Bengalis do end up taking economics. I know all of them. And that is like a family thing. Acha, beta, maine like that sort of thing. But you see it even with the good Xavier's Mumbai, Xavier's Calcutta, and good universities in the south, Stella Marie. I have really good students from Stella Marie who are coming to me for internships also. And now Azim Premji and Kriya, Ashoka, Dr. Deshpande is running a fantastic center in Ashoka called CEDA, and she's teaching economics there as well. She's a professional friend, I would say, and I've seen how she's teaching firsthand. So those are very innovative places in India to do your bachelor's and even master's. And then later, if you feel that, okay, I've now done this and now I'd like to get a second master's, then one can go abroad. Another thing I've seen with economists is after the bachelor's in econ, say that you don't want to do a very math-heavy master's, you can go for a master's in public policy. Because again, that prepares you like an MPP or an MPA, prepares you very well for a government consulting position or an international organization, which are very interesting areas and growing areas, because with government consulting, nearly every department has 5 or 7 consultants on 10-12 assignments that are currently going on. So it's only so this is a very, very important industry, government consulting, and for that a master's in public policy or public administration, MPA, is very good. Now for an MPA you need to have a bit of work experience, And for an MPP, you can go as a fresher also after your bachelor's. But I do believe that a bachelor's in statistics or math is the only alternative to a bachelor's in economics if you want to do a master's in economics, at least abroad. In India, engineering is also another option, but you cannot do it after a less math. Every time you go up the degree, your math level is going to go up. So you have to take a degree which is more math intensive at the lower level and go to a less math intensive. So you can take a very math intensive bachelor's and then go to a master's in economics. Then from there, a PhD in public policy. So every time the math level, because it goes up. Earlier in my time, to be very honest, at that time we didn't have many options here. The only options we had were 3 or 4 schools. There was D School, JNU, ISI had a few seats, and then IGIBR. These were the 3 or 4 really highly ranked, good masters in economics courses. About 10 years ago, we didn't have that many options for masters. I would say that if you combine the size of all those seats, you had about 50 seats in D School, maybe another 100 in JNU, and then 100 for the rest of India combined in the top 5-10 schools. So you're talking about 250 spots for a master's in economics, right? And for a country of our size. And each year from DU, I think 50,000, 60,000 students were coming out. So the ratio is insane to get in. In such a scenario, the UK becomes a very viable alternative because in the US, they don't accept your 3-year bachelor degree. So then you're again stuck, acha, main ek saal kya karu? So Ashoka has now found a workaround for that with their liberal arts bachelor's and then the 1 year of diploma. Then their students can go to the US. But in DU, we don't have that workaround. So the UK becomes a natural option for most people from DU. The other thing is, I actually have this feeling that going to the UK and studying in many of the UK colleges, apart from the math level for which they give you like a bridge year or some bridge courses that you can do, now I think they've reduced the length of the bridge courses also to 3 to 6 months. It's very easy to adapt to the textbooks and systems because we actually use very similar textbooks at bachelor's level. But it's just that stuff that they are teaching in the UK in the 3rd year of the undergrad is something that is taught to us in the 1st year of the postgrad. So we have a full year that we are behind in terms of the UK teaching. And in the US, the teaching is very different because you don't actually have an honors course at bachelor's level. So you're going for a liberal arts kind of a degree and then you're, doing a specialization in econ. So by the time you get to the master's level, you actually are not on the same trajectory as someone who's an honors person over here, but your math level is much higher. Because again, if you want to do a master's in eco in the US, they make you do higher order algebra, topology, statistics and data science courses at the bachelor's level. So teaching is very different in the US. So UK is easier to adapt after you've done an undergrad in India. So that's why a lot of people naturally get attracted there. And I think LSE has been, for me, it's been career defining. Because, see, again, I wouldn't say that this is applicable to all the UK universities, but there are certain universities like Oxford, Cambridge and LSE, which are in a league of their own. And when you go to one of these institutions, you become part of an alumni network, you become part of a very different category of professors who come there. And then when you talk to them and the kind of work and challenges that they are working on and that they are entrusted with, it's different, And of course, I think Warwick and UCL and Imperial, these 3 are after the LSE, Oxford, Cambridge. And, they are also very, very good, especially UCL. I mean, it's just brilliant. Their econ department is just brilliant. And one of my friends just joined the Bank of England after finishing her PhD in econ at UCL. And she's doing phenomenally well. So again, it's not just about RBI, but also central banks across the world are open to you once you do your training in those countries. Also Spain, there are so many of my students who are going to Spain these days for their masters in econ, because again in Spain you get a very high scholarship for your masters. In the UK you have to pay for yourself. But in most of the European countries you're getting great scholarships for masters and PhD. And all of their highly skilled departments like the central banks and planning organizations, ministries of finance, they are hiring these kids. They don't care if they are immigrants or they are from the same nationality. They have the skills and they are getting hired. So I think in India, when we are staying here, there are a lot of advantages. We are motivated, especially by nation building. Like I think Jahanwi and I probably share this, that we are very motivated with the idea of working here and building something here, because we've seen that. But the new gen, the Alpha and the Zs, they've seen a very different India from what we experienced in the 90s and early 2000s. So now they're like, we want the best thing in the world. We are the most skilled, because they are. When you look at the skill levels of highly educated Indians, it's brilliant what they are able to achieve when they go abroad. So I do think that if somebody is able to afford it or is able to get the scholarship and they can go for masters, they should consider it. And also it sends a message to the government that we need to invest more in higher education. Because even today, the options are there, but they're still limited compared to what we are getting abroad. And also the teachers. That's the biggest difference. The professors, they are not just professors. They are advisors to ministries of finance. They are advisors to, the biggest corporations. They have flourishing careers outside of being teachers. And that makes such a difference to see your professor as a role model who is doing many things.
Internships are really important. A lot of government departments, including India Exam, we also run an internship program for economists in their who are in their master's second year. And a lot of other institutions such as Niti Aayog, RBI, they also have their internship programs. And these are very useful, these are good additions to the resume. And in Indian universities, a lot of the students, they prefer to go for campus placements. And that time these internships are really useful, because fresh out of college, if you have something to show in your resume, it is definitely a very, very big addition. Sometimes the professors, they themselves offer internships to students. Many of these professors, they are not just, their primary role is not just professors. They are serving as members of many working groups of the government. They are consultants on a lot of international financial institutions. They're consulting them on a lot of projects. So, and they cannot do the entire work themselves. So they also need these students to get a lot of the data mining done, and to get a lot of the surveys filled. And it also adds to the resume of the students as well. And it is also a good learning experience. For example, when I was in JNU, I took up an internship with an NGO. It was Action Aid. The NGO was called Action Aid. And we had the opportunity to go to Madhya Pradesh, to a very, very small village in Madhya Pradesh, where bonded labor was still practiced. It was a revelation for me to see this kind of a labor structure in a modern society, in a modern economy like India. And it was quite eye-opening, and that was a defining moment in my life as well. it added to my resume, that is a different thing. But these internships, they open up your eyes to a lot of things. That was a defining moment where I decided that I need to do something which leads to some policy action, which contributes to the society in some manner.
And how does one get these internships, Jahanwi? Because it's not like I can go to Internshala and get an internship as an economist, right? I mean, because they're very rarely available. Most internships that you end up getting are sales, marketing, digital marketing, that kind of stuff. So if I want to get an internship or a fellowship as an economist, besides going to Mitali, where can I go?
So as I mentioned, a lot of these government departments, they have their internship programs. And these are like open exam. They have they are published on their website, and you have to apply. Perhaps you'll be asked to write an exam, and then you are shortlisted for an internship. Even at Exim Bank, when we have an internship, me and a few of my colleagues will take interviews, and on the basis of those interviews, we will select a few candidates for the internship program. Apart from that, as I was mentioning earlier, economics classrooms, they're not huge. Your professors are, not some god or some manna in the heaven. They are very approachable, and they always need your help. So if you do not end up with an internship at a government institution or in a private institution, as I was mentioning earlier, a lot of the private sector, big tech companies are looking for economists, and they're looking for internship positions as well. So that is definitely an option. But even if you are not able to get an internship in a government department, in a private sector, you can always reach out to your professors in your postgrad, and they will be happy to engage you somewhere.
I will say the first thing, if any undergrad student who's doing economics is looking for an internship, our website is called nicoreassociates.com. We have a dedicated apply page. Please apply. We have a task. First, you have to do the task. You have to pass the task. 90% of people who apply to us do not clear the task. So that gives you an idea of how you should upskill yourself before applying for our internship. And then, come work with us. Grovel, it's grueling hours, 20 hours a week, which is very tough for most of the interns to manage along with studies, but they do it. And once they do it, it builds two skills. One is data crunching. A lot of data crunching work is done by interns, but if you notice, so I'll give you an example of one thing that my interns did. It was just phenomenal, right? We were starting one of the first projects we were doing, writing a book. I was writing a book chapter on women's labor force participation in India. And I said, I'm not going to write just anything which is like a lit review. I'm going to do a fresh data piece. So what do I need for this? I need a data bank. So I created a team of 35 interns, headed by an intern who I trusted more than the others because she was just too dedicated to this topic. And I said, in सबसे बनवाओ. We downloaded all of the available data from 1951 to 2020 at that time when we were doing this, on female labor force participation, workforce participation, unemployment rates, wages, everything. And we have now created a proprietary data bank, and this is all the labor of interns which has done it. And it would not be possible without the interns. And I have named each and every one of those interns in my acknowledgements in this book when it got published. The one difference between working at Nikore Associates and working anywhere else for an intern is that we make sure that the intern's name comes on something that is published widely. Whether it's a book chapter, whether it's a article, whether it's an op-ed, media piece, whatever. It could just be something we upload on our website, but their name will come. They will have to make a video for our social media to communicate what they have been working. And every intern tells me this is not available elsewhere. People invisibilize interns' work. So it's very important that when they are looking for internships, they should look for places which give them an opportunity to shine. Even if it's a project dedicated for them, it's not a project that affects the company's work, fine, okay, but it gives the opportunity for the intern to present their work. So Observer Research Foundation is another very great place for interns. I have interned there also in my youth. And I mean, apart from Nikore Associates, the only other place which I recommend to people, go to ORF, work there, learn over there, and you can even get a job opportunity. It's a very, very good place to work. Now, but this is at bachelor's level we are talking. Now, for the master, definitely ADB, World Bank, UN agencies, everybody takes interns at the master's level, but they don't take them directly in India. You have to apply internationally, and then you will be allocated India as one of your countries. It's possible that you may also work on other countries. Otherwise, just after you graduated, simply you can get an internship even then. So there's a rule in the, so I started my career with an internship. My first job was actually an internship, and it was at the UN Women in New York. I had just about graduated from LSE, but I had not got my graduation certificate. So there were 3 months left for my graduation certificate between my last exam and graduation certificate. So in those 3 months, I took up an internship. And I went to New York straight from London, relocated everything, and started working at the UN Women HQ. And in those 3 months, I had to get a job because otherwise I'd be graduating without a job. And within those 3 months, with my work and hard work, I stayed in office every day for 12 hours. And they did not know what to do with me in the beginning. I used to go there and I'd say, Acha, aaj kya kaam karna hai? What do I have to do today? And I had like one boss and she was giving me some work, but she wasn't giving me enough to fill my day. So I started going to every person in the department and I said, okay, you need help with anything, I'm here. I'm an intern, I'm available, you can give me work. So they said, okay, we can give you work. So then they started trusting me. And by the end of those 3 months, I had my contract. Starting on 1st of October. With a proper, daily rate, everything in the UN system. In HQ, because every day of those 3 months, I went and I asked for work. Sometimes as an intern, your manager also doesn't know how to use you. So you have to go and tell them, you just give me anything, I'll support you.
I think if you go through that entire process of first going through an undergrad degree and then a postgrad degree, by the end of it, you will know what you want to do. There are certain fields that you would be more passionate about. For example, I knew that I'm more passionate about development economics and labor economics, public policy. So I knew that I want to get into the public sector where I can make difference in some manner. Many people, they are clear that they want to enter a private sector, they want a hefty salary, and they sit for campus placements. If you're in an Indian university, and especially the top ones, there are many companies that come for campus placement. And if you're interested in that sort of a job, that sort of career, you can sit for the campus placements. Even if you don't make it in the campus placements and you're still interested in doing a private sector job, there are many data analytics companies that you can apply for. And apart from that, of course, you have the IES, the Indian Economic Services. Of course, the seats there are very, very limited. So, and it takes a toll because you have to prepare for it quite a lot for a very limited number of seats. So you have to be prepared. You need to have that kind of a mindset if you're sitting for the Indian Economic Services. Apart from that, then there are institutions such as Niti Aayog, which take on short-term period basis, consultants. They take fresh graduates also, I believe. And you can also apply for RBI. RBI has a good enough number of seats, better than Indian Economic Services. So that is one of course, you can apply for Exim Bank. We have very small research team here, but we do come out with openings in regular intervals in say 2 or 3 years. So that is another option. And then there are the big tech companies which are hiring, many economists these days, especially more so in the US, but also in India also. I think they are hiring in quite good numbers. So these are some of the options. And of course, the usual career websites are a good place where you can look for opportunities and apply. I'm sure people would be aware about the usual career websites that are there. So that could be a good source for looking for opportunities. And then, of course, if you're looking for international financial institutions, they are quite competitive. It is better if you have some sort of an internship experience, have some experience of working in different geographies before you apply for a position in one of these international financial institutions. These are also correct me if I'm wrong, Mitali, there are also terms, like 3-year terms for which you are hired, and then those get renewed.
I think for the next segment, I should charge all the big four separate fees, because I'm really going to promote them in the answer to this. So, I totally agree with Jahanwi on many things, that it's very difficult to crack. Like, especially, I think when I look back at my career, I was very lucky to start at the UN. My first job was the UN because I did so much model UN. Then I interned with a couple of UN organizations throughout my master's. I interned with the UN, principles of responsible finance in London, then UN Women in New York, and then I got my consultancy. And then I got a World Bank consultancy very early again in my career because of my LSE education and the fact that my professor was a consultant with World Bank and he was doing a project and he wanted an RE. Exactly what Jahanwi was saying, that approach your professors because they may be working with these organizations. So that's kind of how the trajectory goes. But as I was doing these things early on, right, in the first year of work, I felt I needed an environment where I could do a lot of things. Right? As I said, type A, obsessed, insane personality was like, this is not enough exposure. I'm young, I want more and more and more. So for that, I went to a consulting firm. Because in a consulting firm, you don't work on one thing for a long time. You do one project, you do your piece, you give it to the client, 3 months, 6 months, you're done. And then you move to the next thing. And I think that some people just have that personality that they want more exposure, they want more learning. This is typically the case when you are young. Because when you are starting and you're not sure, in that case, going to a consulting firm is great for 2-3 reasons. Number one, they make you work so hard that you start to reevaluate कि मैंने काम ही क्यों किया, काम ही छोड़ देते हो मैं, early retirement ले लो. 16 घंटे is normal in consulting, but it's getting better. It's getting better because people like me are becoming partners now, so it's getting better. My age people are becoming seniors. Second is the consultants. They are embedded in many organizations. So, World Bank, EDB, UN, many of these, they are taking the services of these consultants. So, there's a lot of, exposure into the world of these organizations that comes from the consulting firms. Then they also work with private sector in the CSR teams and the public policy teams. So, you get exposure there as well. It helps you to rotate on projects. And then, of course, if you are joining a consulting firm in a management training kind of position, then they will position you not only in the government team or the on the private or the public sector side, but you can even say, I want to be on the private sector side. And understand over there about operations, about management, so as an economics student, you have a lot of options about where you can plug and play yourself. And a consulting firm is a really conducive environment to do that because they need resources in different verticals, and wherever you can get through, I really feel that people should start their careers in consulting. The third reason why consulting is great is because the industry is expanding so fast that there are a lot of jobs. There's a high requirement for skilled graduates. So you can get in easily.
I have been in the same organization for the past nearly a decade, so I can tell you the trajectory here. So when I first joined, I basically used to do a lot of number crunching. And the good thing about Exim Bank is that you start writing your own papers quite early. So the junior staff, it writes the paper, and then it is reviewed by the senior staff. There are 2 levels of review that happens. So when you first join the organization, you do a lot of number crunching. Then slowly you start writing your own publications. You come up with your own ideas, you write your own publications. And then at the next stage, as you become more senior in the organization, you start reviewing other people's work. And then at an even senior level, you are looking at perhaps an entire team, reviewing the work of the entire team. Other than that, there's a lot of government related job as well that we do. We provide, as I was mentioning earlier, we provide recommendations to the central as well as the state governments on a lot of policy aspects. So as you move higher up the ladder, you become more involved in the policy related aspects as well. And even junior staff work on those assignments, but then you sort of become the face of the bank. When you're interacting with the government, you become the face of the bank. It is not you who is speaking, it is Exim Bank which is speaking. Also, as you move higher up the ladder, your opinion starts to matter in the media, in the economy in general. So people approach you for your opinion. Now, how does this opinion benefit the organization that you're representing? So if, for example, I give a media interview today, it's not me as an individual who is speaking. It is me as an economist with India Exim Bank that is speaking. So that also gives visibility to my institution. So as I move higher up the value chain, I am representing my institution. When I go and meet probably the FM of a country, I am representing my organization there. So as you move higher up the chain, you become the institution in a manner. You are carrying the name of the institution with you wherever you are going, whichever platform you are going at. And it becomes more of a public facing job at that point of time as you move higher up the value chain. At the lower end, you are basically doing the groundwork, the number crunching and policy formulation. Although we try to give a lot of exposure to our junior colleagues as well in the meetings which are not at a very, very high level. We take our junior colleagues, we groom them in a manner that at some point of time they will be able to handle these meetings single-handedly. So we groom them in a particular way, so that by the time they reach at a, say, chief manager level or a general manager level, they are able to represent the institution alone. So we groom them in that manner. So there's exposure, there's a lot of exposure at the junior level as well. But at the junior level, we expect more of the research work and number crunching to be done rather than a lot of public facing roles.
This is a very interesting perspective. My perspective is a bit different because I have never stuck with one organization for more than 2 years, and I have moved a lot in the industry, and a lot of the work, in fact, that I've been doing for the last 6 years till now, because now I'm full time with World Bank from just last week actually, has been in the form of a freelancer. So, how do you actually grow if you are not attached to any organization and no one is grooming you, right? You are grooming yourself and you are trying to set yourself apart in a market of experts, because many economists are actually experts for a lot of organizations when we are hired. I think it's really about constantly upskilling yourself. So I have taught myself a lot of the gender mainstreaming analysis that I am pioneering in these organizations. People didn't even know that this could be done, but I brought it in. Then there were, because they had regulations, so I studied those regulations. I said, okay, ADB is saying you need to have a gender action plan in every project. I can do it for you. So I think it's all about putting yourself out there and saying that, I have these skills and I'll be the best person that you can hire to actually deliver this assignment. Then on media appearances and, just putting yourself out there, I think sometimes mostly when I speak, I try to speak as myself, not as my organization, because till now I've been mostly freelancer. And that's been because of my advocacy work that I'm doing on gender equality, which I always go and I say, these are my personal views and not the views of any of my clients, because till now most of these organizations were my clients. Even now at the World Bank, it's very interesting that we have the right as staff to be able to do academic work and to be able to do mentoring of students in our personal capacity. So all the work, everything I'm saying today is in a personal capacity and does not reflect the views of the bank. And this is an important distinction that we draw, because sometimes you may want to mentor students or may want to do academic work outside of your regular work as well, which is like this session. So I think it's very important to build your own skills and then to use that to grow. So growth is not just about getting a promotion. Growth is about what you wrote 1 year ago. Go and look at it, and today critique it and say, what the hell did I write? I should have written it this way. And in every year you should know that you are growing, because your knowledge is growing, your skills are growing. You can earn much more by doing an MBA or by doing finance or by doing, so very honest. An economist is always going to be, unless you are selling your time to somebody who wants to buy your time, as I was doing, and I was therefore setting a certain rate, but even there I was not very happy, because again I saw men in my sector with the same qualifications as me getting paid more, because we would share with each other, right? My colleagues and some of our consultants, we are good friends, we would share. Okay, this client is giving me so much, how much they are giving you? You know that as a woman you are getting paid less. So that's one of the biggest problems. The second is, of course, that as an economist, you are often a cost center for any organization, whether it's a government or whether it's a private sector. In that case, you're never going to be paid as much as the CEO. And a CEO is typically somebody with an MBA. So, that's the second caveat. The third is, if you are an economist, try to go to an organization where you would be the revenue generator. So if you're going to a consulting firm, or you're setting up your own consulting firm, or you're going to one of the IFIs, because for the IFIs, an economist is a revenue generator, because you are the one who's doing the loan design, the program design, the research, which for them is revenue generation. So at the end of the day, if you want to maximize your income, you should be a revenue generator, not a cost center. That's very important, or at least a cost saver, if not a cost center. Revenue generator is best, then cost saver, then cost center. Other cost center, your job will get, automated in the next few years. So just forget about it. Like, very honestly, I'm telling.
In the government sector, as you know, it is very different. So if you compare the starting salary, I think the government salary would be much better than what you get in the private sector, because there are a lot of benefits that come with it. But the salary growth in the private sector is much better. So say 10, 20 years time down the line, your private sector counterparts would be earning much more than you in terms of gross salary at least. So, but when I joined Exim Bank, so the typical private sector job that students would get in a campus placement was somewhere in the range of around 6 to 10 lakhs. That was the average in INR in India. And then with say around 6 to 7 years of experience, you can expect in the range of around 25 to 30. Challenges, as I was mentioning earlier, there are certain things that come with the job. So if you are a data analyst, if you have to do a lot of data crunching, data analysis, then sometimes it can be a little difficult because getting the model right, getting the testing right, all that can be a little difficult. The second challenge that I see is that it's a very dynamic field. You have to remain updated all the time. Every day the paradigm can change completely. There are so many factors, so many variables. There's a currency volatility, inflation, the GDP, how it is doing. You have to be updated, you have to be on your toes, because when you are representing an organization, representing any organization as an economist, you need to know everything in the universe of economics. So if there's a war happening, you need to know the impact of that across your area, across the economy, across the globe. So even tiny information which might not be relevant for a general public would be important for an economist. It would be just one column in your newspaper daily, very small corner, but it might be very relevant for an economist. So you need to be very updated. You need to keep reading a lot. And I think it's not that difficult. There's no challenge as such. Just that I think these are some of the challenges which you would have in any job. Even if you are a CEO of a company, you would need to know like what is happening around the world, even very little things. So it's not really a challenge, but yeah, these are some of the demanding things that the profession demands from you.
Actually, at a loss, I don't find it that challenging. I think what is challenging about working in the policy space, I would say, more than as an economist, is that you have to have a very strong network. At the end of the day, it's as I said, it's a very small world. And whatever subsector you may choose. So I'm just giving the example of policy because that's my experience. But I'm sure the same holds true when you look at any of the other subsectors like banking, private sector, or even government. The hardest part is to get a foot in the door, because you really want to start off at the right positioning. Especially in policy, if you don't join an IFI early on, maybe, and you are stuck in, maybe an organization that doesn't have a very good positioning or something, and maybe it shuts down. So, in fact, one of the first organizations I joined, a consulting firm, it shut down in India, and then they transferred me to South Africa. So, which is something I got lucky with. But some of the other staff, they had to find jobs very fast, and their careers did take a hit in the long run as well. So I think we have to be very careful about where one is working. The second thing which I find challenging is one has to again be very accurate and sure about the data. Because once you put a number out there in a publication or in a report, that number gets quoted again and again, and it becomes the final ultimate truth of that particular analysis. And then you're like, but जब मैंने calculate किया था, मैं ठीक था assumption correctly, वो तो 4 बार cite हो गया. So you have to be very, very sure about your data, your analysis, your accuracy. You have to double check, triple check. even if you have a team, like I have a team which does most of my data work, but I personally check it even today, every calculation, because I'm so scared that there will be a mistake. जैसे वो क्लास 12 के एग्जाम पेपर में एक फीलिंग आई थी कि यार ये तो इसमें तो 100 out of 100 आने ही हैं. That feeling continues still today when you are doing your calculations. So it's something you can't shake off. It's a very important thing. Third is about being careful about how you conduct yourself publicly. You are, as Jahanwi said, she is representing exam. For me, I'm representing myself most of the time. And I'm belonging to a sector where my word as an expert is being taken by many decision makers. In that situation, whatever you advise, and sometimes you're put in a situation where people are literally you're doing an elevator pitch. Somebody is standing with you and they're saying, please tell us what is your view. Yesterday only I got asked something about maternity policy because I've written about it and somebody in the policy space wanted some advice. And she was like, I just have 15 minutes, you can tell me your view. So as an expert, you often have to think on your feet. But whatever you say must be accurate. So as Jahanwi said, keep on reading, keep on innovating, keep on thinking. If you have thoughts, you have to constantly journal them. Yeah, आज मुझे ये policy idea आ रहा है, let me write it down because maybe in a few months or even 2 or 3 years, somebody will ask me for this. So it's like I find it hard to turn off sometimes, and to decompress.
You should be liking mathematics if you're taking this as a profession. If you don't like mathematics, I mean, I know we have said this several times during today's webinar, but economics, since it is considered a social science, it is typically clubbed with a lot of other subjects such as psychology, which do not require a lot of mathematics. But even when you are studying economics, you need a lot of mathematics. You'll need abstract algebra. You need to know all those sort of things. So if you don't like mathematics, I don't think this would be a right career choice. And if you don't like mathematics, I don't think you should be considering economics as a profession. But if you like mathematics, if you like data, I think this is the field for you because, data is so interesting sometimes. There are many books that I can recommend people to read on economics.
Jahanwi, tell us, yeah.
So one of the first books I read was Economics. I'm sure many people would have read about it. Then there was this book on behavioral economists called Thinking Fast and Slow. So these are some of the books that are really interesting, and you should read them. It will give you some flavor of what economics is. A little bit fun side of economics. So, and hopefully after you are done reading these books, you would find economics as a subject interesting. The reason why I'm asking to read Thinking Fast and Slow particularly is because the way we understand economics today is changing rapidly. And, the behavioral economics is the next big thing. Even the union budget had a discussion about behavioral economics. Of course, gender is another lens through which people are increasingly looking at economics. Also, environmental economics, that is emerging as a very, very important space. And there are things happening in environmental economics that we as economists sometimes find it difficult to keep pace with it. The scope 1, scope 2, scope 3 emissions that we are talking about, the ESG taxonomies that we are talking about. All these are jargons. Let me not confuse you with the jargons, but these are the things that are happening in environmental economic space, and it is a very emerging area. So the economics that we understand today is changing very rapidly. So the future generation, they need to keep a tab on these aspects as well. The emerging areas for economics, because this is what the future is.
Got it. Mitali, over to you.
So, no, I think, I got two pieces of advice when I started. I got the math advice, and I also got this advice that I should do my PhD. And, I took the math advice very seriously. I really invested a lot in alternative math training to understand and become familiar with, how to do like calculations very fast and how to sort of, and I also didn't get afraid. And I also invested a lot in statistics, which I think today we haven't spoken about much, but I would like to emphasize that, even learning about basic statistical modeling and spending a lot of time on R, SPSS, data, these kind of software. Basically, don't be afraid of it. Not just large terms, but one thing I would definitely tell anybody who's entering this field is you're going to hear a lot of jargon. But you hear jargon in any field. किसी भी field में आपको मिलेगा. Just don't be scared of it and just be open to experimenting with things. And if you don't like it, it's the easiest field to step out of and go towards public policy or development studies or finance. So there's a lot of exit options. It's a very fungible field which links nicely with others. So that's the first piece of advice I would give. Second piece of advice on the PhD, I have not followed it yet, but I probably will at some time in my career. But I will say that if somebody does want to do a PhD, I would still say work first. Don't do a PhD directly, because a lot of people who are doing PhDs, who are going into academia, can finish their PhDs, and when we meet them on the other side, because it's a life-changing experience to do a PhD, it's very tough. When we meet them after 6 years, 7 years, sometimes people need 8 years to do a PhD. They have not had that life experience of working on ground, but they have spent a lot of time in academia. I feel like you need a lot of patience to do that, and a lot of years of youth where you want to be outdoor and you want to be in the field. You may end up spending in doing, assignments and projects, which are also very good and fulfilling, I'm sure, for those who have done it. But my personal experience is that I've enjoyed this 1 decade, and in the next decade, I'm really looking forward to combining more academic work with field work. So I will recommend to people personally that try to work for a few years, even if it's 3 years, before you do your PhD. If you're and experience the world of work before you get into a PhD.
Got it. Super. Thank you so much, Mitali and Jahanwi, for sharing those absolutely invaluable insights and spending, so much more time than you originally signed up for with us. Right. I really, really appreciate it. For the audience watching, I hope you got a lot of insights about how does the career of an economist go, and how do you become an economist, and what is the education needed, and some tips and advice on your internships, on how do you get a job, how do you grow, how much money you can make, and so on and so forth. But Mitali and Jahanwi, really appreciate it and grateful that you could take out 2 hours and give us all of this information. And for the audience watching in, please do leave your feedback and questions, if any, on the chat box. We'd love to know what you thought of it. And if there are any questions that weren't answered, we'll get them answered via email or via, one-on-one discussion after. But cheers, everybody. Have a wonderful weekend ahead and a very, very happy 2023 to everybody that's joined in.
Thank you. Thank you, Nikore. Thank you, Mitali. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.